Growing up in El Salvador as a kid that loved video games, there weren't that many stores around where you could actually buy any of them. No Toys R Us, no EB Games, nothing. A select few places did have a couple of games, but they were such a hot commodity that the markup on them was extremely high. So one of the ways I got to play different games was going over to friends' houses, or I'd go with my brothers to one of the few game rental places around, like Beto's Video. Nowadays, you can just download a demo of a game to see if you like it or not, but back then we had no way of knowing, so we'd be forced to pick the game cartridge with the coolest looking cover and hope for the best. This led to us playing terrible games like Friday the 13th, or X-Men. An entire weekend playing the worst games because it was either that or beating Mario for the 100th time. Another way to play new games was when a family member was going to the States on a business trip, or when we got news that a relative was coming back to El Salvador after having been gone for a long time. That's when I'd start scanning through our GamePro magazines to see what games looked cool and had good reviews. You wanted to avoid looking through any video game magazines in Spanish because they were all paid shills, and they'd give crappy games like Michael Jordan Chaos in the Windy City 5 stars and say it was a must-have. So I'd write down a list of games and hand it to my relative, and then I'd wait for months and months hoping that I'd get any of them. One time I asked for Battletoads and Battle Maniacs, and I was so excited for it that for a month straight, my mom would come pick me up at school, and I'd sit in the back seat of the car facing the window, imagining it was a TV screen. Then I'd imagine a Battletoad appearing right outside my window, and as soon as my mom accelerated the car, the Battletoad was off and running, and I had to have lightning-quick reflexes to make the Battletoad jump over every bush and fire hydrant that whizzed past my window. And whenever we got stuck in traffic, the Battletoad would punch all the cars out of the way to keep advancing through the level. A month later, I finally did end up getting Battletoads and Battle Maniacs, and it was even more awesome than I hoped it'd be. Sometimes I'd even get surprise games that weren't on my list. Weird games like Pocky and Rocky or Mischief Makers. Games that I never would have considered asking for, but grew to cherish just as much as the other ones. So throughout my childhood, I'd been content with getting 1 or maybe 2 games a year. I'd beat them over and over, and most of them had cool cheat codes too, so I figured I had it made. I'd think to myself, what more could I ever possibly ask for? Until the day came when we got our first PC. And that's when the floodgates opened. Nesticles, Nest 9X, Genesis, emulators for any console, and the ability to play any game imaginable, all at my fingertips. I started off small, playing hacked versions of Mario Brothers, where nothing was different really. They just swap out the Power Mushroom sprite for a dick or something. And for a while, I couldn't download any Super Nintendo or Genesis games because the files were too big. And our dial-up internet always got disconnected, so most of the games never got past being 50% downloaded until I had to try again. This changed when I found a program called GetRight, which allowed downloads to be paused and resumed at will. So now all I had to do was resume the download a half dozen times throughout the day whenever the internet would go out, and I was set. I never had a Genesis growing up, so now I got to play awesome games like Gunstar Heroes and Comic Zone, games I'd seen in magazines and could only dream of ever playing before. And this was all cool for a while, but then I started getting spoiled. I'd get impatient as a game's intro started playing, hitting enter on my keyboard as fast as I could because I wanted to get to the good part. Or if a game didn't hook me within the first 5 minutes of me playing it, I'd be done with it and I'd try another one. It got so bad that the normal speed at which the games ran felt too slow to me, so I'd make the frame skip go up to 9 to speed everything up as much as I could. That's why years later when I'd be hanging out with friends, we'd talk about songs from old games we used to play, and when we'd listen to them, everyone else would be like, yeah man, that's an awesome song right there. But to me it always sounded like the song was being played underwater and it felt super slow, and I'd immediately be brought back to the time when I was an impatient little bastard. So I kept downloading more and more games, and I played less and less of whatever new ones I'd be trying out, because I wasn't that pathetic kid that only got 1 or 2 games per year anymore. This was the new Andy, and new Andy has a huge supply of downloaded ROMs in his queue just itching to be played. I did this for weeks and I thought I was hot shit, until a little game called Earthbound made its way into my queue, and it quickly brought me back down to reality. The thing about Earthbound is that it sets itself apart from other games right from the start. Before the game's even started, it asks you what your favorite homemade food is, and you have to take a moment to think, what is my favorite food? This small interaction was like a breath of fresh air, because over my weeks of downloading, I'd become jaded and I felt most games were desperate to prove that they were worthy of my time. I'd also played so many games that nothing seemed exciting anymore, so I'd be like, yeah, I'm a cybernetic future knight tasked with protecting the king's realm. Or yeah, okay, I'm the last surviving member of my ninja clan and I must have my revenge. But Earthbound felt like if one day you're at school and a kid you've never talked to comes up to you and asks, hey, do you like dolphins? And you're taken aback for a bit, but you answer, yeah, I like dolphins, I guess. And the kid says, cool, I like dolphins too. And then he just walks away. There's just something real sweet and disarming about it. It makes you want to hang out with that dude because he seems cool and weird. That's what Earthbound felt like to me. The game hasn't even started yet, and already it's making me feel warm and fuzzy inside. And the more I played it, the more I felt like I was coming upon some major realization. It was the first game that made me laugh out loud. Every single thing about it oozed with personality, and it wasn't like other games where if something cool happened, I just think, that was cool, and move on. It was more like something cool would happen, and I'd think, Earthbound, you've done it again. Kind of like I was hanging out with a friend. And that's when it hit me. Video games are made by living, breathing human beings just like me. Here I'd been just moments before at the peak of my shallow, selfish, consumerist state. Entertain me, this does not please me, this game sucks, off with its head. And just like that, Earthbound broke through and parted the clouds with all of its charm, all of its uniqueness. And it made this selfish kid realize that games aren't just things made for his own personal enjoyment. Games can also be a form of expression. They can have a message they're trying to convey. And they're made by living, breathing human beings just like me. Whenever I'm browsing random gaming forums and I see kids saying a game's retarded, or a game's gay, or that a game developer is being retardedly gay, I think back to my experience, and I take comfort in the fact that they'll come across their own personal Earthbound someday. A game so awesome it'll pierce right through their armor of entitlement, and they'll learn the same lesson I did years ago. And that's why Earthbound will always be my favorite game.